The day I walked out of that courtroom a free man would be the day my daughter lost everything she'd stolen from me. I took a deep breath of the cold Vancouver air, watching the rain streak down the window of my lawyer's office. 22 months. That's how long they'd kept me locked away for a crime I didn't commit. 22 months of concrete walls, fluorescent lights, and the bitter taste of betrayal that never quite left my mouth. My name is Richard Holloway, and I'm 63 years old. For 40 years, I built Holloway Marine Supply from nothing into one of the most respected maritime equipment suppliers in British Columbia. My late wife, Catherine, and I had poured everything into that business. When she passed 5 years ago from cancer, I threw myself even deeper into the work. It was all I had left, aside from our daughter, Rebecca. Even now, saying her name feels like swallowing glass. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a Tuesday morning in March 2022. I remember because the cherry blossoms were just starting to bloom along my street in Kitsilano. I'd arrived at the office early, as always, to review our quarterly reports. We'd just secured a major contract with the Canadian Coast Guard. $6 million. The culmination of 2 years of negotiations. Rebecca had been my CFO for the past 8 years. She was brilliant with numbers, had an MBA from UBC, and I'd been so proud when she joined the family business. Her husband, Derek Chen, worked as a consultant for various tech startups. Nice enough guy, or so I thought. They'd been married for 4 years and had a daughter, my granddaughter Emma, who was 6 years old at the time. That morning, Rebecca walked into my office with Derek and 2 RCMP officers. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice flat and cold in a way I'd never heard before. The officers informed me I was under investigation for embezzling $850,000 from Holloway Marine Supply. They had bank statements showing transfers to an offshore account in my name. They had forged invoices from suppliers that didn't exist. They had emails with my digital signature authorizing fraudulent payments. I couldn't breathe. This is insane. Rebecca, tell them. You handle all the accounts. You know I would never. That's exactly why this is so painful, Dad. She interrupted, and I swear to God, there were actual tears in her eyes. I discovered the discrepancies 3 weeks ago. I've been working with our auditors, hoping there was some mistake. But the evidence is overwhelming. You've been systematically stealing from your own company for the past 2 years. That's a lie, I shouted, but the officers were already reading me my rights. Derek put his arm around Rebecca's shoulders. Sir, I know this is difficult, but we have a responsibility to Emma. We can't have her grandfather be a thief. They arrested me that day. The bail hearing was a disaster. The Crown argued I was a flight risk with access to offshore funds. My lawyer at the time, a corporate attorney named Paul Morrison who'd handled our business contracts for years, seemed completely out of his depth in criminal court. Bail was set at $500,000. Here's where it got truly diabolical. My assets were frozen pending investigation. The company accounts, my personal accounts, even the joint account I'd shared with Catherine that still had her name on it. Everything. The only way to make bail was for Rebecca to authorize a loan against the company, which she could do as CFO with her 40% ownership. She refused. I'm sorry, Dad, but I have to think about Emma's future. If you're innocent, the trial will prove it. Until then, I can't risk the company's financial stability. So I sat in pretrial detention at the North Fraser Pretrial Center for 4 months before the trial even began. Paul Morrison was replaced by a public defender named Jennifer Walsh, a young woman fresh out of law school who was handling her 3rd criminal case. She meant well, but she was drowning. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution laid out their case meticulously. Bank records showing transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands under my name. Invoices from companies like Pacific Marine Distributors and Coastal Equipment Solutions that investigation proved had never existed. Email chains where I supposedly authorized payments to these ghost companies. All with my digital signature, which our IT department confirmed came from my computer. Rebecca testified. She walked the jury through the company's financial structure, explained how she'd noticed irregularities during a routine audit, how she'd confronted me privately, and I denied everything, how she'd had no choice but to go to the authorities. I loved my father, she said on the stand, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. But I loved my daughter more. I couldn't let her grow up thinking that theft and fraud were acceptable just because it was family. Derek testified too. He talked about how I'd become distant after Catherine's death, how I'd made comments about feeling like I'd worked my whole life and deserved to enjoy some of that money, how I'd asked him about cryptocurrency and offshore investment strategies. All lies, but delivered with such conviction that I could see the jury believing him. The defense tried. Jennifer brought in a handwriting expert who said some of the signatures looked potentially inconsistent, but couldn't definitively prove forgery. We couldn't afford a digital forensics expert to examine the emails. We had no investigators to track down where the money actually went. I testified in my own defense. I explained that I had no knowledge of these transactions, that Rebecca had full access to all company accounts, that I'd never even set up an offshore account, but without concrete proof, without evidence to counter their mountain of documentation. I just looked like a guilty man making excuses. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on 12 counts of fraud and embezzlement. The judge sentenced me to 3 years. With credit for time served, I had 26 months remaining. They sent me to William Head Institution, a medium security facility on Vancouver Island. I'd built a company worth $20 million, and now I was sleeping on a thin mattress in a 6-by-8-foot cell, listening to the sound of the ocean that had once represented freedom and opportunity. The first few months were the worst. Rebecca sent me one letter. It said she hoped I would use this time to reflect on what I'd done, to find some peace, and that she would bring Emma to visit once I was ready to admit my guilt and apologize. I wrote back one sentence. I am innocent, and one day I will prove it. She never contacted me again. But here's what Rebecca and Derek didn't know. William Head has an education program, and in that program, I met a man named Tom Nakamura. Tom was 68, serving the last year of a 7-year sentence for his role in a mortgage fraud scheme. Before his conviction, Tom had been a forensic accountant for the RCMP. He'd made one terrible mistake near the end of his career, got greedy, and it cost him everything. Tom and I were assigned to the same woodworking class. We got to talking, and when I told him my story, something shifted in his expression. "Richard," he said quietly one afternoon as we sanded table legs, "everything you're describing sounds wrong. The offshore account, the ghost companies, the email trail, it's too clean. Real embezzlement is messy. People get greedy. They make mistakes. They leave gaps. This sounds like someone who knows exactly how investigations work, set you up. My daughter is a CFO, not a criminal mastermind," I said bitterly. "Maybe not. But her husband is a tech consultant. Does he know anything about digital security?" I thought about it. Derek had actually helped us upgrade our company's email system 2 years ago. He'd said it would improve efficiency and security. I'd given him administrative access to implement the changes. Tom leaned closer. "Listen to me carefully. You need a better lawyer, and you need someone who can do real forensic work. But since you can't afford that, you need to become your own investigator. I can teach you what to look for." For the next 18 months, Tom taught me everything he knew. How to trace money through shell corporations, how to identify digital forgeries, how to spot patterns in fraudulent documentation. We spent hours in the prison library, using my limited computer access to research corporate fraud cases, to understand the techniques prosecutors used and the mistakes criminals made. Tom showed me how to file Freedom of Information requests to get copies of all the evidence used in my trial. We went through every bank statement, every invoice, every email with a fine-tooth comb, and we found the cracks. The offshore account had been opened using my passport information. But Tom noticed the account opening date, February 14, 2020. I had been in Toronto that entire week for a maritime trade show. I had flight records, hotel receipts, even photos from the conference that I'd sent to Catherine before she got sick. There was no way I could have opened an account in the Cayman Islands on that date. The ghost company invoices all had subtle formatting inconsistencies. The fonts were slightly different from our legitimate supplier invoices. The company registration numbers, when we looked them up, belonged to real companies but in different provinces. Someone had copied legitimate business numbers and attached them to fake names. The emails were the smoking gun. Tom taught me about metadata, the hidden information in every digital file. We filed a request for the full digital forensics report. When it finally arrived, Tom nearly jumped out of his chair. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a line of code I couldn't understand. "The email metadata shows they were created from your computer. Yes. But look at the timestamp and the IP address. These emails were supposedly sent during business hours, but the IP address shows they came from a residential location in West Vancouver. Where do Rebecca and Derek live? West Vancouver, I whispered. Now look at the dates. February through November 2020. Cross-reference those with your calendar. Where were you? I pulled up my old calendar records. During that entire period, I'd been working from home because of COVID-19 lockdowns. The office had been closed except for essential warehouse staff. Rebecca had been the only person going into the office regularly because she needed to process payroll and vendor payments. She'd had access to my office computer. Derek, with his administrative access to our email system, could have logged in remotely as me and created those emails from their home. But proving it was another matter. I was still in prison, still had no money, and still had a criminal record. That's when I got a call from someone I'd never expected to hear from again. Michael Brennan. Mike had been my business partner in the very early days of Holloway Marine, back when we were just two guys with a warehouse and a dream. He'd sold me his share of the business 25 years ago when he moved to Alberta, and we'd lost touch. "Richard, I just found out what happened to you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I should have been paying attention. It's not your fault, Mike. Maybe not, but I'm going to help you fix it. I've made good money in oil and gas up here, and I've got some contacts. I've already reached out to a lawyer in Vancouver, Sharon Park. She specializes in wrongful convictions. She's willing to take your case pro bono if you've got any evidence at all." Sharon Park was a force of nature. She was 48, a former Crown prosecutor who'd switched sides after watching too many innocent people get railroaded by an overworked system. She visited me at William Head 3 weeks after Mike's call. I showed her everything Tom and I had compiled, the timeline discrepancies, the metadata analysis, the impossible account opening. She listened, took notes, and when I finished, she smiled. "Richard, this is good. This is really good. It's not enough for an appeal yet, but it's enough to start a proper investigation. I'm going to need you to trust me and be patient. We're going to do this right." Sharon hired a private investigator named David Song and a digital forensics expert named Dr. Patricia Mwangi. Real professionals, not overworked public servants. They started pulling threads. David discovered that Derek's consulting business had been on the verge of bankruptcy in early 2020. He'd invested heavily in a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed, losing nearly $300,000 of personal savings. Then, suddenly, in March 2020, right after the embezzlement supposedly started, Derek paid off all his debts and put a down payment on a $2.3 million house in West Vancouver. Dr. Mwangi's analysis was even more damning. She proved definitively that the emails had been created using administrator access, with timestamp manipulation, to make them appear as if they'd been sent months earlier than they actually were. The IP logs showed that someone at Rebecca and Derek's home address had accessed my office computer remotely on 47 different occasions, always when I wasn't there. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sharon had subpoenaed the Cayman Islands Bank to trace where the $850,000 had actually gone. It took months and multiple court orders, but finally, the records came through. The money had been transferred to 3 different accounts. One belonged to a numbered company in Delaware that David traced back to Derek. The second went to an investment account in Rebecca's maiden name. The third, and this made my blood run cold, had been transferred to a college fund for Emma. They'd stolen from me and put it in their daughter's name, knowing that even if they got caught, recovering money from a minor's educational fund would be nearly impossible. I served 22 months before Sharon filed for an appeal based on new evidence. The Crown fought it, of course. They didn't want to admit they'd gotten it wrong. But Dr. Mwangi's forensic report was unassailable, and David's financial investigation showed a clear trail from my company to Derek and Rebecca's personal enrichment. The appeal hearing was set for October 2024. I was transported back to the courthouse in Vancouver, wearing the same suit I'd been arrested in, now 2 sizes too big because prison food had melted the weight off me. Sharon presented our case methodically, the timeline proving I couldn't have opened the offshore account, the digital forensics showing email manipulation, the financial records showing Derek and Rebecca's sudden wealth, the IP logs proving remote access from their home. The Crown prosecutor, a different person than the one who'd convicted me, looked genuinely disturbed as the evidence piled up. During a recess, Sharon told me he'd approached her about a deal. "Absolutely not," I said. "I want exoneration, not a settlement." The 3-judge panel took 2 weeks to deliberate. When they returned, The lead judge didn't mince words. "Mr. Holloway, it is the finding of this court that your conviction was a miscarriage of justice. The evidence presented demonstrates not only reasonable doubt, but a clear pattern of fraud perpetrated against you. Your conviction is hereby overturned, and you are released immediately, with our sincere apologies for the failure of the justice system." I walked out of that courthouse a free man for the first time in nearly 2 years. Sharon was already moving to the next phase. "We're filing criminal charges against Rebecca and Derek," she said. "Fraud, forgery, perjury, conspiracy, and we're suing for civil damages. Every penny they took, plus compensation for your wrongful imprisonment." The criminal investigation moved faster than I expected. Once the RCMP got involved with the full forensic evidence, they executed search warrants on Rebecca and Derek's home and devices. They found everything. Emails between Rebecca and Derek planning the scheme. Derek's research on how to create offshore accounts. Rebecca's notes on which invoices to forge and how to make them look legitimate. They'd started planning this 6 months before Catherine died. They'd seen it as their inheritance, something they deserved for Rebecca putting in years at the company. When I didn't volunteer to sign over the business or make them equal partners, they decided to take it. Derek was arrested at his office. Rebecca was arrested at Holloway Marine Supply, my company that she'd been running in my absence. Their bail hearing was beautiful to watch. Sharon made sure I was there. The Crown argued they were both flight risks, with proven ability to hide assets. Bail was set at $750,000 each. Rebecca looked at me across the courtroom, and for just a moment, I saw fear replace the cold calculation that had been there during my trial. Derek's parents mortgaged their house to make his bail. Rebecca sat in pre-trial detention for 6 weeks before she finally accepted a bail reduction, and her sister co-signed. But here's where the story takes a turn that still breaks my heart. Emma, my granddaughter, had been living with Derek's parents during all of this. Sharon informed me that we needed to address the college fund. It had grown to nearly $400,000 with investment returns. "That money was stolen from you, Richard. Legally, it needs to be returned as part of restitution." I thought about Emma. She was 8 now. I hadn't seen her since the day I was arrested. This wasn't her fault. None of this was her fault. "No," I said. "Leave that account alone. Emma didn't choose her parents. She didn't ask for any of this. That money stays in trust for her education. But with one condition. I'm named as the trustee, and it can only be used for legitimate educational expenses. Not 1 penny goes to Rebecca or Derek." Sharon raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. She's going to need therapy and support after watching both her parents go to prison. The least I can do is make sure she can get an education." The trial was set for March 2025. I insisted on being there for every day of it. Derek tried to make a deal first. He offered to testify against Rebecca in exchange for a reduced sentence. The Crown considered it, but Sharon pushed back hard. They planned this together, executed it together, and profited together. Derek was the technical architect. Rebecca was the inside operator. Neither one deserves a pass. The trial lasted 5 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury took less than 4 hours to convict both of them on all counts. Derek got 8 years. Rebecca got 7, with credit for time served during her bail violation. But I wanted more than just prison time. I wanted the company back. The civil suit was complex. Holloway Marine Supply was technically still operating, now run by an interim CEO that the board had appointed. Rebecca's shares had been seized as proceeds of crime. The company itself was valued at $24 million now, having grown despite the scandal. Sharon argued that Rebecca's ownership stake had been obtained through fraud, since she'd used her CFO position to embezzle funds that she then used to increase her ownership. Every share she'd purchased over the past 5 years should be returned to me. Derek's parents tried to intervene, claiming they had rights as Emma's guardians to protect her interests, but the judge was having none of it. The child's interests are protected by the educational trust Mr. Holloway generously allowed to stand. The shares in question belonged to Mr. Holloway. Case closed. I got my company back. All of it. 100% ownership. But the real closure came from an unexpected conversation. Emma's therapist reached out through Sharon. Emma wanted to see me. Derek's parents had been telling her that I was the bad guy, that I'd lied to hurt her parents. But she'd been having nightmares, and in therapy, she'd finally admitted she remembered the day I was arrested. "I heard Mommy and Daddy practicing what to say the night before," Emma told her therapist. "Daddy kept saying, 'Stick to the script,' and Mommy was crying. I didn't understand what it meant, but I knew something was wrong. Sharon arranged a supervised visit at a neutral location. I hadn't seen Emma in over 2 years. She was taller now, her hair longer, and she had Catherine's eyes. She ran to me and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she sobbed. "I'm sorry they hurt you. I'm sorry I believed them." "Oh, sweetheart, you have nothing to be sorry for," I said, holding her close. "None of this is your fault. Not one single bit. Do you hate Mommy and Daddy?" I took a deep breath. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that you can hate what someone did while still understanding they're her parents? I'm very angry at what they did. They hurt me badly, and they made choices that hurt you too. But you're allowed to love them anyway. They're your parents. This is complicated, and it's okay for you to have complicated feelings. Can I still see you, even though they're in jail? Emma, I want to see you as much as possible. If that's okay with you. She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I missed you, Grandpa. I missed you so much. We started having weekly visits. Derek's parents fought it at first, but the family court judge sided with me once Emma expressed her wishes clearly. I rebuilt my relationship with my granddaughter one Saturday afternoon at a time. We'd go to Science World, or walk around Stanley Park, or just sit in my living room and talk. I told her stories about her grandmother, about building the business, about all the things I wanted her to know about her family before the betrayal had poisoned everything. As for Holloway Marine Supply, I made some changes. I hired a new CFO, a meticulous woman named Janet Crawford, who'd worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers for 20 years. I implemented new oversight procedures, checks and balances that would make it impossible for one person to move money without multiple approvals. I set up a foundation in Catherine's name to provide scholarships for students pursuing maritime careers. And I changed my will. Everything goes to Emma now, held in trust until she's 30, with professional trustees to manage it. Not her parents, not Derek's parents. Independent professionals who will act in her best interests. Rebecca writes to me sometimes from prison. The letters are always the same. She's sorry. She was scared about money. Derek pressured her. She made a terrible mistake. She wants forgiveness. I don't write back. Maybe someday I will, but not now. The wound is still too fresh. She didn't just steal money from me. She stole 2 years of my life. My freedom, my reputation. She was willing to let me die in prison rather than admit what she'd done. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Derek writes too, but his letters are different. He blames everyone but himself. The system failed him. I was greedy. Rebecca was manipulative. The judge was biased. On and on. Those letters I throw away without reading past the first paragraph. I'm 65 now, 2 years older than I should be, if you account for the time stolen from me. But I'm free, I'm vindicated, and I have my granddaughter back in my life. I have my company, stronger than ever. I have my reputation restored. Every morning, I wake up in my own bed, make my coffee, and walk down to the marina near my house. I watch the boats heading out into English Bay, and I think about how close I came to losing everything. How easy it would have been to give up in that cell, to accept the guilty verdict, and just serve my time. But I didn't. I fought, I learned, I planned, and when the moment came, I was ready. The day I walked out of that courtroom was indeed the day Rebecca and Derek lost everything. Their freedom, their money, their reputations, their daughter's trust. Everything they'd been willing to destroy me to get. Was it worth it? That's what Emma asked me once, during one of our Saturday visits. Grandpa, was it worth it? All the time in prison, all the fighting, just to get revenge? It wasn't about revenge, sweetheart, I told her. It was about the truth. It was about making sure that people who do terrible things face consequences. It was about showing you that even when the world is unfair, even when people you love betray you, you don't have to accept injustice. You fight for what's right, no matter how long it takes. She thought about that for a moment, then nodded. Grandma would have been proud of you. I think she would have been proud of both of us, I said. We survived something that should have broken us, and we're still here. And we are, still here, still fighting, still building something better from the wreckage of what was destroyed. That's the truth they never tell you about betrayal. It doesn't end when the guilty are punished. It doesn't end when you win in court. It ends when you decide that what was taken from you won't define who you become. I'm Richard Holloway. I spent 22 months in prison for a crime I didn't commit, and I came out stronger than the people who put me there ever imagined possible. And I'm still standing.